Hello and welcome to the English Flow channel. I'm David and I'm really glad you're here today. Let me ask you something. Have you ever studied English for a long time, learned grammar rules, memorized vocabulary, and still felt nervous when it was time to speak? If that sounds familiar, you are definitely not alone. Many English learners feel exactly the same way. They know a lot more than they think, but when they want to speak, they freeze. The words disappear, the confidence drops, and suddenly English feels much harder than it really is. But here is the good news. Speaking English well is not only about knowing more grammar, it is not about memorizing thousands of difficult words, and it is definitely not about sounding perfect. The real goal is much simpler than that. The goal is to become comfortable with the kind of English people actually use in everyday life. In this video, we are going to focus on something practical, simple, and powerful. We are going to work with useful English sentences that can help you speak more naturally in daily situations. These are the kinds of sentences you can use when you talk about your day, your feelings, your plans, your work, your family, your problems, and your opinions. In other words, this is the English you really need, and I want you to stay with me until the end, because this is not just another lesson where you listen passively and forget everything a few minutes later. This is a lesson you can truly use. If you repeat these kinds of sentences regularly, your brain slowly starts to recognize patterns. Your mouth becomes more comfortable with the sounds. And most importantly, you begin to think in English instead of translating everything from your own language. That is why practical speaking practice matters so much. The more familiar you become with useful everyday expressions, the less you need to stop and think. You begin to respond more naturally. You begin to trust yourself more. And when that happens, speaking English becomes less stressful and much more enjoyable. Think about the kinds of things people say every day. They ask simple questions. They talk about food, time, work, feelings, plans, problems, weather, music, and daily routines. They ask for help. They explain what happened. They agree or disagree. They apologize. They encourage each other. Daily English is not always complicated. In fact, it is often quite simple. The real difference is confidence and repetition. For example, if you want to sound more natural, you should be very comfortable with everyday phrases like, "I'm on my way. I'll call you later." Could you repeat that? "I'm not sure. That sounds great." "I'm really tired today. What do you think?" "It was nice meeting you." These are not difficult sentences, but they are extremely useful. They appear again and again in real life. And when you practice these kinds of sentences regularly, something important happens. You stop seeing English as a school subject and start seeing it as a living language. It becomes something you use, not something you only study. That change is powerful. I also want to remind you that confidence does not come first. Practice comes first. A lot of people wait to feel confident before they speak, but that is not how it works. Confidence grows because you practice. Confidence grows because you repeat. Confidence grows because you try, even when it feels uncomfortable at first. So if you sometimes feel shy, slow, or unsure, that is okay. You do not need to be advanced to begin. You only need to begin. Small progress is still progress. Even learning a few useful sentences well can make a big difference in your speaking. Another important point is this: you do not need to learn everything at once. Many learners put too much pressure on themselves. They think they need perfect pronunciation, advanced vocabulary, and complete grammar control before they can have a conversation. But real progress usually happens in a simpler way. You learn useful phrases. You repeat them many times. You use them in context. Then, little by little, your English becomes stronger. This is why I always recommend focusing on language that is practical, common, and easy to use in daily situations. If a sentence helps you in real life, it is worth learning. If you can imagine yourself using it in a real conversation, it is valuable. This kind of English gives you immediate results. And let's be honest for a moment. Most people do not need complicated textbook English in daily conversation. They need clear, natural, useful English. They need to know how to respond when someone asks how they are doing. They need to know how to ask for clarification, how to make a plan, how to express an opinion, how to say they are tired, hungry, happy, confused, or busy. That is the English that makes communication possible. The great thing is that once you become familiar with these sentence patterns, you can use them in many different situations. A simple phrase can become the foundation for many conversations. That is why this method is so effective. It helps you build speaking ability from real language, not from isolated words. So from this moment, I want you to change your mindset. Do not think, my English is not good enough. Instead, think, I am improving every day. Do not think, I am afraid to make mistakes. Think, every mistake helps me learn. And do not think fluency is too far away. Think I'm getting closer every time I practice. Because the truth is, you are probably much closer than you realize. You already understand more English than you think. Now the next step is to make that English active, to bring it out, to make it part of your speaking, and that only happens through practice, repetition, patience, and consistency. So take a deep breath, stay focused, and keep an open mind. This lesson is here to help you speak more naturally, more calmly, and more confidently. You do not have to rush. You do not have to be perfect. You just have to keep going. And if you do that, if you continue practicing useful English every day, even for a short time, you will notice progress. Your listening will improve. Your speaking will become smoother. You will hesitate less. You will trust yourself more. And one day you will look back and realize that English no longer feels impossible. It feels familiar. That is the moment we are working toward. So let's continue together. Let's make English feel simpler, more natural, and more alive. And remember, every sentence you practice is one more step toward fluency. Partie 2. Now let's talk about what really helps you sound more natural in English. In everyday life, communication is not about using the most impressive words. It is about expressing yourself clearly and comfortably. If someone asks you a question, you want to answer without fear. If you need help, you want to ask in a simple and polite way. If you want to join a conversation, you want to know what to say and how to say it. That is why everyday sentences are so important. When you practice useful phrases again and again, they become automatic. You do not need to search for every word. You do not need to panic about grammar every second. You simply recognize the situation and the right expression comes more easily to you. That is how natural speaking starts. Imagine a normal day in your life. You wake up, check the time, maybe feel tired, maybe need coffee, maybe think about your plans. Later, you talk to someone, ask a question, answer a message, explain something, make a decision, react to good news, or deal with a problem. Every part of that day can become English practice. You can say things like, "I'm really tired today. I need some coffee. What's the plan for today? I'll be there soon. Could you help me with this? I'm not sure about that. That sounds like a good idea. Please speak a little slower. I didn't understand. I'll call you later." These kinds of sentences are simple, but they are powerful because they are real. That is the type of English you should practice the most, not because it is easy, but because it is useful. The more useful a sentence is, the more often you will use it. And the more often you use it, the faster it becomes part of your natural speaking. Many learners make the mistake of spending too much time on difficult words they may never use. Of course, vocabulary matters. Grammar matters too. But if your goal is to speak, you need to focus strongly on language that appears in real conversations. That is what makes the biggest difference. Another reason this approach works so well is because it reduces fear. When you already know a sentence well, you feel safer using it. You are less afraid of making mistakes. You are less likely to freeze. Familiar language creates confidence, and confidence helps you speak more. So when you learn English, do not just ask yourself, "Is this sentence correct?" Also ask yourself, "Can I use this in real life?" If the answer is yes, then it is a sentence worth practicing many times. Let me also say something important about repetition. Repetition is not boring when it produces results. In fact, repetition is one of the fastest ways to improve speaking. When you repeat useful English out loud, you train your ears, your memory, your pronunciation, and your speaking rhythm at the same time. Repetition helps your brain and your mouth work together. This is why reading silently is not enough if your goal is speaking. You need to hear the language, repeat it, and use it actively. Even a few minutes of speaking practice every day can help more than long hours of passive study. And please remember this. Progress in English is not always dramatic from one day to the next. Sometimes it feels slow. Sometimes you feel like nothing is changing. But if you keep practicing, the results build quietly in the background. Then one day you notice that you answered faster, understood more, or spoke with less hesitation. That is real progress. Try to enjoy that process. Do not only focus on the final goal. Yes, fluency is a beautiful goal, but every small improvement matters too. Understanding a new phrase matters. Responding more quickly matters. Feeling less nervous matters. These small wins are signs that you are moving forward. And the truth is, speaking English is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming more able to express who you already are. Your thoughts, your humor, your personality, your ideas, your feelings, your opinions, all of that deserves to be heard. English is simply a tool that helps you share those things with more people. So be patient with yourself. Some days will feel easier than others. Some days you will feel motivated, and some days you will feel tired. That is normal. What matters is staying consistent. Even if you only practice a little, keep going. A little every day is far more powerful than a lot once in a while. You can also make practice part of your routine. Use simple English in your mind during the day. Describe what you're doing. Talk about your plans. React to situations in English. Ask yourself questions and answer them. For example, what am I doing right now? What do I need today? How do I feel? What should I do next? This kind of daily mental practice helps train you to think in English naturally. And when you listen to useful English, do not just listen for meaning. Listen for patterns. Notice how people ask questions, how they respond politely, how they agree, how they disagree, how they explain things simply. The more patterns you notice, the easier it becomes to use them yourself. Little by little, English starts to feel less like a puzzle and more like a habit. That is the transformation we want. We want English to become something familiar in your daily life, something you can reach for naturally, something that helps you connect with people, express yourself clearly, and move through conversations with more ease. So keep practicing useful sentences. Keep repeating them out loud. Keep listening carefully. Keep using English in small ways every day. These simple actions may not look dramatic, but they are incredibly effective over time. And most of all, keep believing that improvement is possible for you. Because it is. You do not need to become perfect to become fluent. You do not need to know every word to speak well. You do not need to wait for the perfect moment to begin. You can improve starting now, exactly where you are, step by step. If you continue building your English with patience and consistency, your speaking will become more natural. Your listening will become sharper. Your confidence will grow. And the language that once felt distant will begin to feel like part of your world. So stay with the process. Trust your practice. Speak whenever you can. Repeat what is useful. Learn what is practical. And never underestimate the power of small daily effort. I'm David, and I want you to remember one thing before we finish. You are capable of more than you think. Every time you practice, you are moving forward. Every sentence you learn gives you one more tool. Every moment of effort counts. Keep going, keep learning, and keep speaking. You are closer to confident English than you think.